Hey everybody, this is Zach here at SubItUp, and today we're going to go over a demonstration of SubItUp's timekeeping system. In today's demonstration, we're going to touch on a number of different items. First, we're going to talk about position configuration and how we can configure each position to talk to the schedule so the system knows when to allow people to clock in and out. We're also going to talk about the different ways you can set up devices. So the different types of devices and ways they can be set up to ensure people are only clocking in and out from where you want them to be clocking in and out. We're going to go over some other configuration items as well, such as our auto clockout system, which helps when reconciliating payroll, as well as how to actually get a time clock set up and a device set up to be a time clock. What does it look like? After we go over all that, we're then going to transition more into reporting. What does it look like? How do you see the data? How can I make edits when I need to? How can I see holistic data in the best way? We're going to go over all of that today and get all of your questions answered about how SubItUp's timekeeping system works. The first thing you'll have to do is set up how each position is configured to know when people are allowed to clock in and out. Now you'll see on the left here, I have a list of all the different positions that I'm a manager of, and I'm updating just one of these positions right now, front desk. However, if you have a bunch of different positions that you want to have all the configuration to be exactly the same, you just set this up once and then just hit update all, and it will mass update all of those different positions to have that same exact configuration. Now, we're going to go over what each of these settings mean and how you may be able to apply them on a day-to-day for your staff. These 4 boxes that are listed here are super important because they're really going to tell the system when people are allowed to clock in and out. Let's go through each one. Early clock in. That's our first one. So this is if somebody is scheduled for a shift, how many minutes early are they allowed to clock in? This is really important for budget management. Most organizations round to the nearest quarter hour when people clock in. So if they're scheduled at 7 a.m. and they clock in at 6:55 a.m., they'll start getting paid as of 7 a.m. However, if it's closer to 6:45, so if they clock in at 6:51, they'll actually get paid as of 6:45, an extra 15 minutes for not a whole lot of extra labor. And if you have a large staff, you have lots of shifts, and you do that calculation over how many extra 15 minutes there are here and there over an entire fiscal year, it really adds up fast. So what most people do when they're setting this up is they have early clock in set to either 5 or 7 minutes. And you can even display a custom message. So if they try to clock in earlier than this, it'll give them something custom from you, letting them know they need to wait until the right time to clock in. Now, people being late, this is the next one down, late clock in, is usually a little different. If somebody's late for a shift, typically you still want them to clock in and work for you, but you or other managers want to be notified that they are late and that happened. So what most people do here is they set a window. I'm going to put in 5 minutes again for consistency. And they check this box that says, go ahead and allow employees to clock in after this. So if they're 7, 8 minutes late, we still want them to clock in and work. However, you can also check this bottom notification here that says notify managers and the employee if the employee has not clocked in past this time window. So again, 7 a.m. start time. If that employee has not clocked in at 7:05, which is what I have listed here, this is configurable, then the employee gets a notification that says you haven't clocked in yet, and the managers get a notification that says, hey, your employee hasn't clocked in yet. So everyone's in the loop. You can even display a custom message if they are later than 5 minutes that you can say, hey, come see me, or whatever you want that to say. At the end of the shift, you have the same options. You have early clock out, which is you can allow people to be very flexible on this. If you have a position that, you routinely send people home early, if it's slow or if an event ends early or something like that, you can actually check this box and that will let people clock out at any point at the end of a shift. Or it can be a little more regimented. So if I had this set as like 10 minutes and didn't check this box, people would not be allowed to clock out until within 10 minutes of the end of their shift. Same thing for late clock out here at the bottom. Again, you can check this box and you can be very flexible, which will allow them basically to clock out at any time. Or you could not check the box and say something like maybe it's 30 minutes and they have a 30-minute window after their shift was supposed to end to clock out, and they won't be able to clock out after that. A lot of people that I work with actually do check this box here and let people clock out later. But they also, like late clock in, check the bottom box that notifies managers and the employee if that employee is not clocked out and we hit this window right here. So their shift was supposed to end at 11 a.m. If they haven't clocked out by 11:30, employees, managers, everyone is notified that that happened. Down here at the bottom, there is a couple other settings. The first one is to allow employees to clock in during times when they are not scheduled. If you turn this on, basically your employees are for this position are able to clock in at any time. They don't have to be on a schedule. Most people that I work with for entry level type positions do not have this on. They do not give their employees that kind of flexibility. However, if you have maybe some leadership or folks that you do allow to pop in and work from time to time, they don't have a set schedule, you're not putting a schedule on the calendar, you'd want to go ahead and check this for those types of positions. The other setting here is allow employees to leave notes when they clock in. This is basically when they're clocking in or out, they'll have a little notes field. And if they have that turned on, they'll be able to go in and type in a note for you that says, sorry, I was late, my bus ran long, or whatever that may be. The next one down is manager override. So now we're setting pretty strict limits here, especially if you have early clock in set. But you could give a override pin to the system if you turn this on. And if an employee types that pin in, they'll be able to override any of these values and basically clock in at any time. So if I type that pin in and somebody tries to clock in 12 minutes early, that employee types in that pin, it will let them clock in 12 minutes early. When that happens, the managers are notified anytime the manager override configuration is used that has been applied and somebody clocked in outside of these bounds here. The last thing on this list is the manager communication list. We talked a lot about manager notifications. Managers are being notified. Well, you might have managers on your manager list for a position that don't need to be notified about this. So you'd actually be able to come in here and just choose which managers need to get notified for this specific position. You can also choose if those managers should receive an email or a push notification right to their app. Once this is set up, we can now move on to signifying which devices can be used as time clocks. This is under configuration, and position configuration is the first one. This is where we were at initially. And device configuration is right underneath it. On this page, you're going to see a list of devices that are our test devices here. But when you're starting from scratch, we'll want to hit add new device and create a new one. And there's a lot of different ways we can set this up. A device is any internet connected device, whether it's a computer, an iPad, a tablet, somebody's own phone. Those could all be time clock devices. But you as a manager will be able to tell the system what to allow and who to allow to set up a time clock. Let's go over what some of these options are. So the first one you'll have to kind of really decide on is login type here. And this is when an employee goes to the time clock, how do they identify themselves? How do they tell the system this is who I am so it knows when to allow them to clock in? There's 4 different methods here. The first is standard. Standard is just that employee's SubItUp email and password. If you guys are using SSO, that does not apply here. So this would not be an option for you. If you're using SSO, you need to use one of these other 3. But if you are not using SSO, single sign-on, and you are allowing staff to clock in and clock out with their email and passwords, you could choose standard here. PIN is our most popular. PIN is basically a number that you assign your staff, each staff member. There's a way to upload this, which I'll get to in a little bit. But basically, it's usually a number that they would know. Maybe it's their employee or student ID number. Maybe it's their date of birth, up to 8 digits. It's really up to you as managers to what to assign them. But when you do assign to them, you have to let them know, and that's the number they would use to actually clock in. Phone number is also one. If you've already added your staff in and you have phone numbers in the system already, this could just work with those, and they can type in their phone number, and that can identify them. The last option is scan. Now, for this one, you need a little bit of an extra piece of hardware. You need some sort of barcode scanner or some sort of device. If you're using a tablet, you could actually use the tablet's camera to scan this. But every single employee in their mobile app has a QR code, and that QR code is what is scanned here in order to clock that employee in. So if you're using a computer, you would have to have some sort of QR code, barcode reader that can connect to the computer. If you're using a tablet, though, you could just use that tablet's camera. That would scan the QR code and clock them in. Another big one here is roster punch. So if you are using either a computer, a tablet, or something like that, most folks have this on. There's a back kind of area of the time clock app that lets you log in, and you can actually clock people in and out as you see them. A manager can log in and clock people in and out as they see them. This is usually used for staff meetings where everybody's coming in all at once. And instead of people lining up to clock in, a manager can maybe have a tablet and just start checking people off and clocking them in as they see them walk in. And same thing for when the meeting ends. I'm going to skip down here to selected positions. So I'm selecting, if I'm have a front desk or something like that, you would create a time clock device that's called front desk computer, and you'd want to only choose those positions that are able to clock in on that front desk. On the other side of the house, if you are allowing for some positions, some staff to download the time clock app and clock in on their own phones, you'd only want to list those positions here for that specific time clock device that would let them do that. So this can all be designated by position, and you would tell the system what that is. If you're going to let employees download their own time clock app and clock in on their own personal devices, for install configurations here, you'll want to choose unlimited devices. You would just make one, kind of like I'm doing here, calling it mobile time clock or personal devices, whatever you want to call it. Set it as unlimited, and then if you go over here to allowed users, which is the next one down, you'd be able to choose everyone or all employees. And this lets everyone download the time clock app, configure it, and start using that to clock in and out. If you're not going to do that, and you're instead going to have people a time clock just at the computer or a tablet that's just on site, instead of unlimited, you want to change this to single device. And that means that this configuration can only be applied once. It can't be applied to multiple different devices. And for the allowed users here, you would not want to choose everyone or all employees. You'd want to just say all managers. A manager could configure that device. Or if it's just like a single manager, you can custom select and just choose a single manager to be able to do that. That's the different ways to set up devices. If you are allowing staff to clock in on their own phones, if that is something you would allow them to do, there is an area here called Time Clock Map. There are lots of folks who utilize this feature and are able to see on the map where staff are when they clock in and clock out. We do not at this time support a geofencing feature. One thing that we can't control is where staff's phones are telling us they are, and if they are in either a big building or they have some kind of issue with their device's GPS on their location services, that can skew a little bit. So instead of restricting people in a building or something to be able to clock in and out, if you allow them to, you would allow the staff to clock in and out on their own device, and you'd have a map showing where they are, and we just ask that you use your discretion of where they are when they clock in and out, if that's acceptable to the area where they should be. A couple other configuration options. If we go under configuration here, I mentioned if you're going to use the PIN option, there's a way to import those. So it's right here under scan configuration import. In SubItUp, scan value and PIN really mean the same thing. So you see import scan values. That also means import PIN. You can download a template. The template just has two columns. It is email address and what you want the PIN to be. As long as they're lined up on the same row, select that CSV, and everyone will get loaded instantaneously. So this is how most people do it. But if you did want to use PIN, which is our most popular option, this is how you could do this. The last kind of setting here that I want to talk about is auto clock out. So for auto clock out, we have a list of our positions here. What this helps with is if staff forget to clock out at the end of their shift, what normally happens with most time clocks is staff forget to clock out, they leave for the day, they come back in the next day, the next time they work, and they think they're clocking in for their next shift, but now they're actually clocking out of a 48-hour shift, and all the rest of their punches are all messed up from there. And without an administrator going in and making those changes, that person's time clock payroll for the week is not going to be accurate. And it's really hard to track down when that missed punch occurred. Now, what are the different things I have to change to make it all line up? It gets really messy. So if you have auto clock out on, what you can do is you can set up a clock out window, which basically means if they're scheduled until 7 o'clock, how many minutes would have to pass that we should assume they forgot to clock out? And this should be a pretty big number, right? Like if sometimes people stay an hour late because something came up or you had an emergency, make it 2 hours, make it 120 minutes, right? You can really choose whatever you want here. And if, let's say the shift ends at 7 p.m., we have it set for 2 hours. If that employee is not clocked out by 9 p.m., the system will then auto clock them out for 7 p.m. at the end of when their shift was supposed to end. And you can set it up to email certain managers for each position and notify the employee that they were auto clocked out, right? Everyone's in the loop that this happened. That way, in case the employee did stay until 7:15 and they forgot to clock out and you can verify that, then a manager can go in and change their time from 7 to 7:15 and make sure they get paid appropriately. But this is a crucial tool to just kind of keeping everybody on track and making sure that folks forget to clock out. There isn't a big manual reconciliation process from there. Now we've done all the setup. Let's actually make a time clock device. So again, a time clock device, if you are using a computer or whether it's a laptop or desktop, you'd want to go to timetrackpay.com. Timetrackpay.com. If you are using a mobile app or a mobile device like a phone or a tablet of some sort, you'd go to your app store and download the SubItUp Time Clock app. It's going to show up a little bit in blue. You'll see it's different than the regular SubItUp app. The regular SubItUp app is where they can check their schedules and trade shifts and do things like that. The Time Clock app is the one that is going to let them actually clock in and out. So once that's downloaded, whether it's on the computer or it's here on a mobile app, it's going to look exactly the same. It's going to say, let's get started, and you'll hit set up my device, and then you'll just log in with your email and password. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and I'll hit log in. Once I do that, the system will check my account to see what devices I'm allowed to set up as a manager, and I'm just going to choose one of these here and hit configure device. Once that's done, your time clock's configured. You'll see that I chose pin for my time clock device, so you'll see that here, and I can just type in my pin, and it's going to ask me, hey, are you able to clock in? And look at that. I'm not able to clock in for another 1 minute, right? So it's telling me I have to wait until 1:55 for my 2 o'clock shift. If this position had unscheduled time set up, it's there, and we just hit 1:55, and I'm now allowed to clock in, right? So now that's pretty easy. I hit clock in, and at that point, I have been successfully clocked in for this shift. Clocking out will look exactly the same. This should be a really easy, simple, straightforward way that once everything's configured, you can get these devices configured as a manager and have staff start clocking in. Once people start clocking in and out, now it's up to us to manage the data. The page that I recommend visiting most often is under time clock data. This page here will allow you to kind of in real time manage who's here, who's not, and kind of make adjustments from there. Like you saw that I clocked in earlier. Now it's telling me that Zach did clock in and gave me the exact time, and the green checkbox means yes, I clocked in. However, I'd also recommend going to this page pretty regularly, maybe like once a day or so, and look at a previous day. What you don't want to do is wait until the end of a pay period, and then you go back to this page and you notice that somebody forgot to clock in 9 days ago. It's going to be really hard to remember for you and them exactly what time they showed up 9 days ago. So if I go and I look at the previous day, for instance, you'll see here that Jeremy had a shift. He did clock in. It looks like he clocked in at 9:30 and out at noon. It's telling me he was scheduled for 2 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hours and 15 minutes, but he was actually clocked in for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now, is that what Jeremy was supposed to do? And if that's not what he was supposed to do, I need to make an adjustment. I can then come in here to view edit as a manager, and you'll be able to set permissions on who's allowed to do this. If I hit edit, I can come in and I can say, no, actually, Jeremy showed up at 9:40 instead of 9:30, and I hit save, and that entry has been changed. There is an audit history, so at any point, you need to find out who edited a time clock punch, when did they edit it, what did they edit it to. That's all available here in the time clock history, so you will have access to that. Now, this is a great view for like seeing things on a one-off basis and seeing, okay, did Jeremy clock in and out? Yep, he sure did. That's what the red X means. But if you're running it holistically for a 2-week time frame, there's better ways to do that. I'd recommend under reports, you'd go to payroll report. And once you're here, you're going to be able to load whatever date range that you want. So like I can load for just this July date range here. Hit go. And it will load up and it'll show me Jeremy clocked in. It'll give me the amount of hours he did. It'll give me the total amount of hours for an entire your entire list. If you have pay rates in the system, it'll give you your budget, and your labor cost. You can export this into a CSV. And all these columns that you're seeing here are configurable. So these are just the kind of standard ones that I've had pulled up. But under report options, you're going to be able to tell the system to round it to the nearest quarter hour. You're gonna be able to tell it if you need to see the time clock notes on here, employee IDs. Do you need overtime? If they were ever worked any overtime, split out into a separate column. A lot of different things here that you're gonna be able to configure to make this report exactly how you need it. The last thing I'll go over is we have the time clock set up. We have people clocking in and out. We're able to see and change the data, run our reports. But what if I want to take this data and import it into my payroll system? Well, you'll have access to that as well. And it's under reports here. And you'll see we have pre-set up reports for many of the largest payroll providers. If you do not see one here, that does not mean that there is not a way to import it into the system. A lot of people have used some of these other reports, like for instance, this PeopleSoft export that's here. It's super configurable. Like on this configure tab here, it has all these questions on, do you need a round? Do you need, decimal? How many decimal places? It has a whole bunch of different configurations, and then it has all these different columns of anything you'd ever need and how you're able to label those, custom label those, and you can custom move them around to where they need to be, turn on the ones you need, turn off the ones you don't, to get this to a place where you're actually able to just run this report, hit CSV export, and import it into your payroll system, and that's what people will be paid off of. So this is something that comes with the package. If you are looking to add an additional API or a automated transfer of the data from SubItUp into your payroll system, we do that as well. Just ask for more details on that, and our team will be able to provide it for you. That is the time clock demonstration, timekeeping demonstration. If you have any questions at all about this, or if things in this video have prompted follow-up questions, just reach out to our team, let us know, and we'll be happy to answer anything that you have and get you pointed in the right direction. Thank you so much.